And W here at Super Bowl 52. We're in Minnesota. It's all brought to you by our friends at Howard Bank. I think I'm wearing my Howard Bank hat. I have this green Ravens hat that I've been wearing to honor Eagles fans around here. You know, we've had a lot of celebrities and athletes. Also, most of my show is talking to like sports writers. This is a guy that I've never had on. I don't think I've ever met you. I'm sure we've been in the same press boxes and cattle calls and media. Andy Benoit. I don't even know how to pronounce your name.
You got it right.
The O-I-T and the sort of the Frenchness and I wasn't sure, but I didn't know you're from Boise, Idaho.
And everything's phonetic out there. We're not sophisticated. Benoit, that's too much.
I literally would have called you Andy Benoit, but like if I would have called you and said, "You want to come on the show?" First, I just would have called you Andy, and then I would have said, "How do you pronounce your last name?" You know, because like
I would have said Benoit like Detroit, which is what a PR lady taught me once.
Benoit,
but if you say Benoit, I don't correct you because I don't understand how guys. In fact, you guys had the punter
in Montreal. You're Benoit.
Who was it? Sam? Yeah, was it Sam Cook, the punter you guys had? Was that? And his last name was Koch, if I recall.
Cook.
Who is he to say that's not Cook? That's Koch.
Right.
We already have a language, so who am I to say it's Benoit? It's Benoit. It sorts itself out.
You should just change it.
To Benoit?
Yeah.
My sister did that, and I was telling someone when she graduated, there were
people. Theismann, one of those.
Yeah. Well, when she graduated, we didn't notice her name getting called because we're so used to hearing Benoit. So Catherine Benoit, and we hear Benoit. So you can change it. My parents would be annoyed, not because they are partial, but because it's the logistics of it, I guess.
Man, the MMQB is well represented all across the country, right? I mean, you got people from everywhere, and Peter King has stopped by earlier in the week.
Yeah.
I don't know why I haven't had you on. I don't even really know, like, your deepest, darkest opinions of the Ravens, as an example, because that's what we do. We sit and talk about the Ravens, and Lord knows we can talk about these two teams and all that other stuff. We got our own set of problems. I mean, Bisciotti's having his Friday press conference to kind of hide from everybody. I haven't figured it all out, but the problems in Baltimore on the field are big enough, but the problems off the field are pretty enormous right now with the empty stadium.
Well, it starts at quarterback, right?
Sure.
And because that defense is still maybe it's not the 2000 Ravens, but that's a defense. That's a playoff caliber easily defense. So it's what do we have at quarterback and what do we have to figure out? And that's been really befuddling to see because Joe Flacco for the longest time has been this strong arm, big drop back pocket passer, vertical player. This season he was not that. I don't think he was healthy, and I think it impacted the way he approached the game, which is always – it's one thing to impact your play. When you start having an impact the way you approach the game, that gets very problematic. That's hard to deal with. And we saw how limited that offense was. And they found their identity as the season went along. They started playing more tight ends, doing a lot more in the running game. They became a very run-based offense. And maybe that's what they have to be now. Maybe that's where Joe Flacco is, and that's the QB he is. Maybe that's what he's been all along.
That helps every quarterback. But then you'd say, why do you have a $25 million quarterback and you want to run the ball, right?
Yeah,
that's counterintuitive.
You're right. You could say that. I think when you get into
paying for a car you're not driving, right? Literally, right?
When you get into a run, so what we mean by run-first approach, it's not just let's run the ball a whole bunch. It's also how do we present our passing game? How do we set it up? And when you throw the ball on first or second down, which they started doing late in the year, that Detroit game was the most noticeable one. You get simpler defenses on first and second down. All the complex stuff, the fast defenses, that's all your nickel packages on third down. So if you throw on first and second down, you get a simpler defense, a predictable defense. That gives the QB confidence. It also allows you to draw up designer plays that you know will beat the coverage. A lot of this stuff stems off of play action, and a lot of your downfield throws come out of running formations because you need to throw downfield against the predictable looks. You need the pass rush to be a four-man rush and be removed. So I think when we say, they have to be a running offense, you might still throw the ball 40 times a game and run it 25, but maybe 15 of those throws are coming on first and second down with a couple of tight ends on the field, with receivers tight to the formation, lined up kind of inside rather than outside by the sidelines. That's the kind of offense that I think they need to transition to, and they started to last year.
You were a big fan of James Urban, their new quarterbacks coach, coming over from the Bengals. Tell us a little bit about him. In Baltimore, we haven't had a chance, local media hasn't had a chance to talk to him. We know he was in Philadelphia. Yeah. He was part of the whole Michael Vick renaissance there, but he's been a wide receivers coach. So, Andy, why is he a good hire for the Ravens?
He understands the game all-encompassing, and any more wide receiver and quarterback coaches are so similar now because you're not coming here and teaching these guys how to throw in the NFL. NFL. You're teaching them how to read the field and how to execute the offense, and that's understanding wide receivers and QBs. And Urban does that. I know there were someone from New England went up to Urban before the Patriots played the Bengals, maybe last year, I want to say. And they said, hey, we just want you to know Coach Belichick thinks, and he doesn't know Belichick, he thinks you're the best receivers coach in the NFL because your film is what you are as an assistant coach. And those Bengal receivers were so well coached. They were pristine and consistent in their technique from guy to guy. So Urban is highly respected within the league as a teacher of the game. And what he did with Vic, and I wasn't around, I wasn't familiar with that, but he was with Andy Reid and Marty Morningwig, I think, during some of those times. Right. But he was very much a part of that. And his communication with players is excellent. He's very affable. He's flexible. He's humble. This is a great opportunity for him because if Flacco turns around, Urban's name will get elevated in the conversation. You'll start hearing him as an offensive coordinator candidate. And I think he's a guy that can turn, if anyone can turn Flacco around, I would put my money on James Urban.
Is Morningwig's system a good fit for Joe? You know, one thing we've talked about in Baltimore, you think back to when Cam Cameron was a coordinator, is Air Coryell principles.
Yeah.
And you know, since Super Bowl 47, you know, they've gone more towards West Coast. And, you know, he had success under Kubiak, but other than that, yards per attempt has steadily declined. Is that the best fit for him?
You know, I have trouble answering that because last year, this was some of the issue, and this is not meant as a critic. It's going to come off as a shot right at Marty Morningwig. It's not meant at that.
He's taking enough shots at
okay. Well, all right, well, I'll team up with you here.
I just wonder. You know, I question.
I couldn't tell what they were last year, identity-wise. And so if you say Morningwig's system, I don't get a visual image of that as we're talking. And that's part of the problem. Right. And I think to Morningwig's defense, we've talked about Flacco, and he hasn't been the same guy stylistically. And it's hard to call plays when you don't know what your quarterback is and when he wasn't there in training camp and when your receivers, I mean, that's a whole other discussion. Right. So what is the system and what does he ultimately want to be? And when they have limited resources, which you do with those receivers, and if you don't know what your QB is, then it's hard to find your identity. I think that's another reason to go the run-based stuff because Greg Roman, as their tight ends coach, he's running a lot of their running game, and he's one of the more diverse and creative run game minds in the NFL, and he knows it too. He's very proud of his running game acumen. But I think that's how it is. I think it's Morningwig and Roman need to be running that offense, and the system will be whatever the system materializes from that.
Andy Benoit rhymes with Detroit. There he is from Sports Illustrated and MMQB. You can follow him out on Twitter. Thousands do, and we're here for Super Bowl 52. And, you know, on the Ravens side of things about Flacco, and where are you kind of shocked that it hasn't been blown up? I mean, we talk about the unprecedented nature of the Patriots being here so often. The Ravens have the most unique thing ever. 22 years, no one has ever picked a player other than Ozzie Newsome, ever in the history of the organization.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, wow.
No, you know, that
it's worked out, wouldn't you say? I mean, it's
of
relatively.
Course, but then the question is, where have they been in the last 5 drafts? And, you know, where are you when you draft Matt Elam, he can't play, and you got to go spend money on Weddle and Jefferson? Where are you when Jimmy Smith can't stay on the field? And obviously there have been hits and there have been misses. Right now, the Perryman thing's probably hurting them more than anything because if Perryman just would be serviceable, if Perryman was a 40, 50 catch guy and got on the field, they would be have been a better football team the last 2 years, right?
Well, he was a serviceable contributor last year. He had 499 receiving yards. But my concern with that, and brings it back to what you said about offensive personnel, wide receiver, they haven't invested big contracts. It's always been these guys that are just past their prime. Steve Smith.
Yeah.
Bolden was kind of sort of at the end of his prime.
Yeah.
But you have that, but they've also only taken, I think Perriman is the only receiver that they've drafted on, I want to say day 1 or day 2 since Torrey Smith in 2011. They haven't put the resources into it, so you get what you pay for in the end.
And not all missed draft picks, which everybody has, especially if you're there 22 years, you're going to have some, but they're not all created equal. You can miss on Matt Elam, and there's a great defense around him, and you play a certain way, and it's a wasted pick, but it doesn't hurt you. Perriman's a different case because when you have an outside receiver, and basically what they call an X-ISO, I think is what they ideally thought he would be, which is the guy, Antonio Brown's the Steelers' X-ISO. A.J. Green is the guy that lines up by himself in the formation, especially on
or
obvious.
Or the featured receiver.
Yeah. Well, but I think you need a guy that can play by himself on the weak side, because that's what influences coverages in obvious passing situations. And if you have a guy that's inconsistent out there, which Perriman has been, and teams defend him differently from one week to the next, that's hard to scheme around. And he loses one-on-one too often. And if you're losing, it's one thing to lose one-on-one inside. You're within usually part of a route combination. It's a full context of an offense. Right. The read goes somewhere else. If you're losing one-on-one outside regularly, that removes half the field, and he's the fallback read if the stuff's not open on the front side. Well, now you have no fallback. He's the main read if it's one-on-one coverage, but you're losing one-on-one. It's hard to deal with an X receiver that doesn't win regularly. It's hard to game plan with them.
Well, that's
it's hard
frustrating
to play
for everybody, for the quarterback.
Absolutely. And you can't get a rhythm that way. And that's been a big miss for them, and I think it has to be rectified. I think wide receiver is a legitimate need for the Ravens. Now they got to find someone they like. You can't just say we need a receiver. You have to find someone who can be an X. And Perriman, for as disappointing as he's been, the physical traits, you understand why he got drafted where he did. Those guys don't grow on trees, but they can be found, and I think they need to find one at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it just comes down to this. When at Week 17, when they played Cincinnati, Mike Wallace was their one established NFL receiver they had on the field that day.
And he's got limitations.
Right. He's a number two. And I don't even know if he's a great number two, but he has a certain skill set, and you understand that. But, Mac, I mean, as much as Perriman, Jeremy Maclin this year was a complete non-factor for them other than 2 or 3 games. I mean, and he was the guy that was envisioned to be Steve Smith's replacement.
Well, see, neither of those guys are true one-on-one perimeter winners.
Sure.
Wallace is a go routes or shallow crosses, and anything in between he's a little bit stiff on. Maclin is a puzzle piece in a well-designed offense, and that's great. He can catch 90 balls in that kind of setup. He's done that before, but he's not.
But that takes a running game, and that takes
a lot of things.
Takes a lot of things.
He's not a move-the-meter guy in and of himself. He's not someone you put on the island and, hey, he's winning, and the defense has to have a plan in place for what to do about him. They don't have that guy, and it's hard to build an offense when you don't have a single receiver to build around.
Andy Benoit joining us here from the MMQB and Sports Illustrated. Luke's doing all sorts of football stuff. Go ahead, Luke. You have more.
I had one more question for you on the defensive side. I mean, we talked about this defense as some of the parts. The one guy that I was disappointed in this year was Tony Jefferson. I think, first of all, and the Ravens even acknowledge this a little bit, Dean Pease, their now former defensive coordinator, now in Tennessee, which is another story.
Wow.
But they even acknowledged early on they may not have used him in the best way. In what you saw of Jefferson this year compared to what he did in Arizona, what were your thoughts on him?
I think what Jefferson does really well, he's a downhill player, and if you have him on designs off edge blitzes, something that gets him going downhill, he can be excellent. I thought he was one of the best in the league at that specific thing, probably only behind Landon Collins of the Giants. Okay. He can also cover tight ends in space, and not a lot of guys can do that. So he's a versatile safety, and that works real well with Weddle. Where he struggled a little bit this year is misdirection stuff. He got baited a few times, defeated by designs, and that's where your downhill mindset works against you a little bit. So it's a matter of finding ways to put him in position where he can be aggressive without being prone and vulnerable to having the aggression work against them with double moves or misdirection or play action, whatever it is. They did a lot of cover 2 in Baltimore this year, and an aggressive safety in cover 2, you bite up and now they're behind you. I mean, in Arizona they were a matchup defense, man match. They start in zone, they play, they call the matchup. That was a concern with Jefferson, too. I know I was with him the day he signed with Baltimore. I spent the whole day with them, and we were talking, and the Ravens are not a matchup zone, and how big a factor is it? That's an adjustment for a safety, and I don't know what they're going to do now with Pease gone. Maybe they become more matchup-oriented. They should, if they want to prioritize Jefferson. If they want to prioritize other guys, it's a different discussion.
60 seconds or less. Last follow-up. There's a game there.
Let's
at least get the game in here, and anything else you're plugging beyond the MMQB and SI.
Well, I think the game starts. New England's a better team. We can understand that. The only area where they are not clearly better than Philly, in fact, Philly's clearly better than them, is that defensive line of the Eagles versus that offensive line of the Patriots. And both sides know that, and so it's a matter of what do we do about it? How do we play? And New England has been great as a downfield passing offense this year. We think of them as a spread-out dink and dunk, which they did in the Edelman years, and they're that too. But they've become more of a play-action downfield team. So you can do that and try to wear down that D-line with your running game and maybe get some big chunks. I think they're going to spread out, though. The more I think about this, against Tennessee, they went back to those quick striking spread throws. They just did it like they never stopped. It was seamless, unbelievable. I think they have to do that. Whatever they need to do, it needs to remove the defensive line from the equation, not try to outplay them, because you won't. It needs to remove it so the ball's out quickly. The formation allows for that.
More Peyton Manning-esque kind of.
Yeah, Brady, because when the ball's out quickly, you're right. Your quarterback has to win at the line of scrimmage pre-snap. He has to know where he's going.
If Brady gets hit 8 or 10 times this game, that's not good news for the Patriots, right?
It's not. To his credit, though, he survived that this year. I mean, he's played well despite taking a beating. But your plan is not to go in the Super Bowl and hope our quarterback can take a beating from the league's best defensive line. Your plan is let's find a way to remove the D-line from the equation, and it'll be interesting to see how they do it. And the brilliant thing with New England is if something doesn't work, they can change up right there in the game. Most teams have to decide going in, here's how we're doing it, let's hope it goes. New England can be any kind of offense at any moment.
Well, that was the halftime adjustment last year or last week.
Yeah, it
and,
was.
Might happen this week as well. Andy Benoit rhymes with Detroit. He's out at Sports Illustrated and MMQB. Go follow him, learn some more about football. We're all brought to you by Howard Bank here this week, as well as Rofo and our friends at the Maryland Jockey Club. Laurel Racing this weekend. Always good to have some sports writers, some mic people on the program here, instead of all these athletes and stuff like that. We got some athletic supporters. Great, Andy, to stop by. Luke, anything you want to add on the Ravens side of that? Because sometimes we don't get these sort of the aftermath of all of it, right?
Well, I mean, first of all, you can hear what kind of football acumen he has.
Correct.
I mean, he doesn't just cover this game as a reporter. He clearly breaks it down. And anyone who follows him on Twitter, if you don't, Andy, I believe _Benoit,
correct.
He does breakdowns. And it's not all – I mean, he clearly does lengthy pieces for the MMQB and all of that, but he puts a lot of content on Twitter. He'll just do film room kind of
like Baldy's breakdowns?
Yeah. Well, he'll have a string of 10 tweets on the Ravens-Bengals game from last Sunday or whatever the game is. And, I mean, you get the sense that he really understands how it goes. Interesting comments about James Urban. We haven't had a chance to meet him. I know the official site did a little package on him.
One of the things that they do in this when they get together is say, we need better coaches,
Sure.
and that's going to be something for Belichick if he sticks around. When you lose, go back to the Billick era. When you lose, Del Rio, down the list, and it's the same. Replacing coaches is important, and being able to lure the right coaches, right? I mean, Urban's a guy that could have had jobs in other places, for sure. And I guess the same thing could be said for Greg Roman, who they were very concerned they were going to lose him. So from a coaching standpoint, for John, I think he looks at 4 weeks out from the season, looks at it as a win, that he's improved his staff.
Well, that remains to be seen. He's
You'd
made
like to think
a couple changes. Most of his staff has stayed intact, which a lot of people don't like necessarily, but clearly
Well, the piece for Martindale thing, it will be different.
It'll be
this
different.
Isn't going to be Dean Pease's defense.
Well, the proof's going to be in the pudding. I mean, the reality is, people can talk about Wink Martindale, what he did in 2010 with Denver. That was an eternity ago. 8 years in the NFL. 8 years ago, Ray Lewis was still in his prime.
And a bad defense.
Not in his prime, but still a very good player. But you have that with James Urban. What he mentioned was interesting. He talked about the relationship between quarterback and receivers, coaches, and how that's kind of married in this day and age. But I did find what he said about Marty Morningwig to be very interesting. The whole what's their identity, and we've been asking that for the better part of 4 or 5 years now. Even going back prior to that, when Cameron even.
Well, it's kind of sad that the identity of Joe Flacco is, well, let's hope he hands the ball off. That's not a good identity for Joe right now. Over the last 5 years
it's not good when you're one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league. You want to be getting more of a return, and how much of that is on Joe, which is a fair question, and we've talked about that over and over, and we'll continue to. How much of that is on coaching? How much of that is on personnel? And I think the personnel part of that equation is very clear. Anyone at this point, and maybe I shouldn't be saying this because maybe it wasn't obvious to the Ravens a year ago, but anyone at this point has to be looking at this personnel at the skill positions, tight end and wide receiver especially. Alex Collins, I feel pretty good about him.
Maybe even Kenneth Dixon.
Kenneth Dixon, we'll see. Yeah. I think he's got to earn some trust from a health standpoint and from a 2 drug suspension standpoint now. But they have to improve this personnel. Improve the personnel. You add James Urban, so you're adding a quarterback's coach to the mix. That allows Marty Morningwig to be the coordinator and not coordinator / quarterbacks coach. If you improve those two variables and then Joe Flacco goes out and doesn't play well in 2018, I think you have a much more clear idea as far as where you are rapidly headed as an organization. If you improve those variables and Joe looks at least more like the guy he was in, say, 2014, then maybe you pencil Joe in for playing 3 more years and finishing out his contract, and you're feeling better about that. But they cannot continue to keep going down this same road and expect the results to be different because Joe's not getting any younger. Chances are he's not getting any healthier from a standpoint of the days of him just playing 16 games and you never worried about it. That's probably not the case anymore.
I don't even know who all of our backup quarterbacks have been. I mean, if you had to go back and name them all from 11 years, I mean, people don't remember Mark Bulger was here.
I could do that pretty easy.
Right, but they never walked on the field.
Well, look at Tyrod. Tyrod Taylor is the perfect example there. And, everyone that want to use revisionist history and 2020 hindsight, they should have kept Tyrod. Well, we never really got to find out about Tyrod Taylor in Baltimore, and the Ravens weren't going to let go of a Super Bowl winning quarterback. So, I mean, that whole argument is just ridiculous. But the jury's out. I mean, this is a very...
Imagine if we would have had Nick Foles. We'd be here. I'm making that up.
It's a very, very interesting offseason, a fascinating year on so many different levels, on the field, off the field, and try to figure out, is this current regime, is this current era of Ravens football going to continue, or are we now finally going to see that last chapter? I'm not rooting for that to happen, but 4 out of 5 years, no playoffs. I mean, at some point, you got to start asking for more, no matter what these guys did in the past and how successful they were in the past.
Got to give Howard Bank some love here. A relentless commitment to be the best at everything they do. They are Howard Bank. They're sponsoring all of our efforts here at the Mall of America and Super Bowl 52. We are live on Radio Row. It's also brought to you by the Maryland Jockey Club, as well as Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast, and our friends down at Pizza John's in Essex, where they are open for business with the best pizza and those tasty subs. Stop by and see them and see why. They've spent 50 years down on Back River Neck Road, and my wife might even bring me some Papa John's pizza here before we get it all together. You can find me anytime, anywhere out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day. From anywhere in the world on your mobile device, download the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. The morning newspaper ships each and every morning at 7 a.m. to you, courtesy of Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life, guaranteed. If there's any breaking news, even from here in Minnesota, on Manny Machado and anything else, the Ravens, Steve Bisciotti's press conference, you'll get it first on the WNST Tech Service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis will be here on Thursday driving you home, getting you ready for Super Bowl 52. 52 is a good number. Ray Lewis is going into the Hall of Fame on Saturday. And our bus trip to see number 52, get the bust in Canton, Ohio in August, now on sale at WNST.net. Go to the Road Trips tab. Click there. Easy to buy. Come along with us. We're saving you $50 right now if you do that ahead of time. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.